The crystalline spires of the Centauri Palace pierced the purple sky of Astra Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside the grand throne room, Queen Zara stood before the imperial court, her luminescent silver skin dulled by exhaustion and fear. The weight of 12 years of failed expectations pressed down upon her shoulders, heavier than the ceremonial robes she wore. King Theron, his obsidian scales gleaming with augmented cybernetics, looked down at his wife from the stellar throne. The biological enhancement chips embedded in his temples pulsed with a cold blue light that matched his unseeing gaze. "The laws of our people are absolute," he declared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "The royal line must continue." Zara lifted her chin, fighting to maintain her composure. "My king, the genetic compatibility studies show that the fault may not lie with me alone. If we were to conduct further research..." "Enough." Theron's cybernetic eye flared crimson. 12 cycles have passed, Zara. 12 cycles of empty promises and scientific theories. The Empire requires certainty, not hypotheses. The assembled court members, a mixture of enhanced Centauri nobles and artificial intelligence constructs, stirred restlessly. Zara could feel their judgment, their disappointment. She had been chosen from among thousands for her brilliant mind and genetic potential. Now, she had failed in the most fundamental duty of a queen. "The Council of Elders has reached its decision," announced High Elder Vex, her ancient form barely visible beneath layers of technological augmentation. "Queen Zara is to be stripped of her title and exiled to the outer moon of Sigma 9. Let it be recorded that this sentence is merciful, considering the magnitude of her failure." Zara's hearts, all 3 of them, seemed to stop beating at once. Sigma 9 was a research outpost turned prison, where the Empire sent its unwanted problems to be forgotten. It was a death sentence wrapped in the pretense of mercy. "You cannot," she began, but the words died in her throat as she saw Theron's expression. The man she had loved, the brilliant leader she had supported through countless reforms and innovations, looked at her as if she were a failed experiment. "I can, and I must," Theron replied. "The dynasty's continuation supersedes all other concerns. Your replacement has already been selected. Naira of House Vega will ascend as the new queen consort within the lunar cycle." The name struck Zara like a physical blow. Naira, her former research assistant, decades younger and genetically optimized for reproduction. The betrayal tasted like metal in her mouth. Guards approached with neutralizing fields to escort her away, but Zara raised her hand. "I will walk to my fate with dignity," she declared, her voice carrying the strength she didn't feel. "But remember this, Theron, progress built on cruelty is no progress at all." As she walked through the corridors of the palace one last time, Zara's mind raced through possibilities, through the experiments and research she had conducted in secret. There were answers to their fertility crisis, she was certain of it, but Theron and the Council were too blinded by tradition to see them. The transport ship that would take her to Exile waited on the landing platform, its dark hull a stark contrast to the gleaming city below. Zara took one last look at the world she had called home, at the civilization she had helped advance with her innovations in biotechnology and neural engineering. "Your personal effects have been loaded, Exile," the guard announced, his cybernetic implants preventing any show of emotion. "You are permitted one small laboratory for continued research, as stipulated by the Exile protocols. Consider it a final kindness from your king." Zara stepped into the ship without looking back. A laboratory, even a small one, was more than most exiles received. Perhaps Theron remembered something of their love after all, or perhaps he simply couldn't bear to fully waste her brilliant mind. As the ship lifted off, breaking through Astra Prime's atmosphere, Zara pressed her hand against the viewport. The planet shrank below her, beautiful and cruel in its perfection. She would survive this, she decided. More than that, she would find a way to prove that progress and tradition could coexist, that there were solutions beyond the narrow vision of the Council. The ship's computer announced their trajectory to Sigma-9, but Zara barely heard it. Her mind was already racing with possibilities, with plans and hypotheses. They had exiled her body, but they couldn't exile her mind. And perhaps, in the silence of exile, she would finally find the answers that had eluded her in the glittering chambers of power. The Empire thought they were writing the end of her story. Instead, they had only written the beginning. The surface of Sigma-9 stretched before Zara like a canvas painted in shades of rust and shadow. 3 months had passed since her exile began, each day marked by the peculiar dance of the moon's twin stars, one blue, one red, casting ever-changing colors across the barren landscape. Her laboratory was a modified mining outpost, its walls lined with outdated equipment that seemed to mock her former status. Yet Zara had made it her own, converting defunct mining sensors into crude but functional research tools. The Empire had meant this place to break her spirit. Instead, it had stripped away every distraction from her work. "Analysis complete," announced the aging facility computer, its voice crackling with degradation. "Anomalous energy signatures detected in Sector 7. Zara looked up from her workstation, where she'd been analyzing soil samples for signs of the rare minerals that might explain Sigma-9's unusual magnetic fields. She'd discovered early in her exile that the moon held secrets that the Empire, in its rush to turn the place into a prison, had overlooked. "Display findings," she commanded, watching as holographic data streams filled the air before her. The readings made no sense, or rather, they made too much sense. The energy patterns were too regular, too structured to be natural formations. Donning her environmental suit, Zara ventured out onto the surface. The twin stars painted her silver skin in contrasting hues as she made her way across the rocky terrain. Her suit systems tracked the energy signatures, leading her to a cliff face that looked no different from any other, except for the faintest shimmer when viewed from exactly the right angle. "Incredible," she whispered, reaching out to touch the rock. Her hand passed through the holographic camouflage, revealing a doorway carved with symbols she'd never seen before. They weren't Centauri in origin, nor did they match any known spacefaring civilization in the Empire's vast databases. Before she could investigate further, a different alarm sounded from her suit's sensors. Something was entering the moon's atmosphere, something large and moving far too fast. Zara tracked the object's trajectory with growing concern as it became clear it would impact less than a kilometer from her position. The ground shook as the object, now clearly a ship of unfamiliar design, crashed into Sigma-9's surface. Debris scattered across the landscape, and a plume of dust rose into the alien sky. Zara's first instinct was to retreat to her outpost, to avoid any contact that might complicate her exile. But then she saw movement in the wreckage. Someone had survived. Her medical training overrode her caution. Zara rushed toward the crash site, her heart's pounding with equal parts fear and excitement. As she approached, she saw a figure pulling itself from the wreckage, a human, she realized with shock. She had studied their species during her research but had never encountered one in person. The human was tall, with dark skin and close-cropped hair streaked with silver. He wore what appeared to be some kind of research uniform, now torn and stained with red blood. As she drew closer, he looked up at her with eyes that showed pain but remained alert and curious. "Well," he said in accented standard Galactic, "you're definitely not the rescue party I was expecting." Despite his obvious injuries, his lips curved into a small smile. "I'm Dr. Marcus Rivers," he continued, wincing as he tried to stand. "And I believe I'm about as lost as a human can get in this part of the galaxy." Zara hesitated only a moment before responding. "I'm Za," she caught herself, remembering her stripped title. "I'm Dr. Zara. And you've crashed on Sigma-9, though I suspect that wasn't your intended destination." Marcus attempted to laugh but ended up coughing instead. "No, it certainly wasn't. My research vessel's navigation system was compromised by some kind of energy pulse. I was studying stellar phenomena when everything went haywire. He looked around at the desolate landscape. I don't suppose there's a spaceport nearby. This is a prison moon, Zara replied, helping him stand. The only way off is with Imperial authorization, which I suspect neither of us has at the moment. His eyes widened slightly at her words, studying her with new interest. A prison moon? You don't strike me as a criminal. Political exile, she corrected, leading him toward her outpost. And right now, I'm your best chance at survival. Those injuries need treatment, and the temperature drops to lethal levels when the blue star sets. As they made their slow way across the rocky terrain, Zara's mind raced with possibilities. A human scientist, here of all places, at the exact moment she discovered what might be an ancient alien installation. The coincidence seemed too perfect to be random. But more than that, she felt something she hadn't experienced since her exile began: hope. Marcus Rivers represented everything the Empire feared: human ingenuity, unfettered scientific curiosity, and most importantly, change. Perhaps together, they could unlock not only the mysteries of Sigma-9 but also find a way to challenge the very system that had condemned her to this desolate moon. Behind them, barely visible in the growing darkness, the holographic cliff face shimmed with ancient secrets waiting to be discovered. And somewhere above, in the vast empire she'd left behind, changes were coming that would shake the very foundations of Centauri society. The game of survival had just become a quest for revolution. Inside Zara's outpost laboratory, Marcus recovered quickly under her care. His human physiology responded well to the modified Centauri healing protocols, though Zara had to make numerous adjustments to account for his single heart and unique cellular structure. Over the next few weeks, their conversations grew from cautious exchanges to passionate discussions about science and culture. Your understanding of quantum mechanics is remarkable, Zara noted one evening, watching Marcus examine her jury-rigged research equipment. Though your methods seem almost instinctive rather than structured. Marcus smiled, running his hand over the modified mining scanner. That's humanity for you. We tend to stumble into breakthroughs while looking for something else entirely. Speaking of which, he pulled up a holographic display of the energy readings from the cliff face. These patterns aren't random. They're repeating on a quantum level, like some kind of lock. Zara moved closer, her silver skin catching the blue light of the display. I've been studying them since you arrived. The symbols share similarities with fragments found on other worlds, but they predate both our civilizations. She hesitated, then added, the Empire has suppressed research into such discoveries. They believe some knowledge is too dangerous for the common good. And what do you believe? Marcus asked, his dark eyes meeting hers. I believe knowledge itself is neutral. It's what we choose to do with it that matters. She gestured to the complex equations floating between them. My own research, the work that might have solved our fertility crisis, was deemed too radical because it challenged traditional methods. Marcus's expression darkened. They exiled you for trying to help your people? They exiled me because I failed to produce an heir, Zara corrected, her voice bitter. The research was secondary. The Empire values tradition over progress, stability over growth. She turned away, moving toward the door. Come. The blue star is setting, but we have time to examine the ruins before the temperature drops. At the hidden doorway, their combined expertise proved formidable. Marcus's intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics complemented Zara's systematic approach. Together, they decoded the complex patterns that kept the entrance sealed for millennia. The door opened with a sound like singing crystals, revealing a corridor that seemed to drink in light. The walls were covered in flowing scripts and diagrams that moved when watched directly, yet remained still in peripheral vision. This is incredible, Marcus breathed, his hand hovering over a sequence of symbols. These aren't just decorative, they're instructions. Equations. This entire facility is one massive database. Zara's heart raced as she studied the moving patterns. Look at this section. It's describing genetic manipulation at a level we've barely theorized. The beings who built this, they weren't just studying life, they were perfecting it. As they ventured deeper into the facility, their discoveries grew more astonishing. The ancient race had mastered technologies that the Empire considered impossible, including perfect genetic compatibility between different species. This could change everything, Zara whispered, her hands trembling as she documented the findings. Not just for the Empire, but for all spacefaring races. The applications for medicine alone. A distant alarm cut through her words. Marcus quickly pulled up a feed from the sensors they'd placed outside. Imperial ships, he said grimly. 3 of them, on approach. Zara's blood ran cold. They're not due for a supply drop for another month. Someone must have detected your crash, or our work here. She looked at their discoveries with newfound fear. If they find this place, find you. Then we make sure they don't, Marcus said firmly. He pulled out a small device from his pocket, something he'd been working on in secret. I've modified some of your old equipment. If we can't hide our discoveries, we can at least make sure they reach the right people. Zara stared at him, understanding dawning. You're not just a researcher, are you? Marcus's smile was grim. Let's just say there are many in the human territories who believe the Empire's influence needs to be balanced. We've been watching, waiting for an opportunity. For a moment, Zara felt the weight of choice upon her. She could surrender, plead ignorance of the ruins and Marcus's presence, perhaps earn a reduction in her sentence. Or she could embrace this chance, fight for the change she'd always believed in. The decision crystallized as she heard the distant sound of ships entering the atmosphere. The Empire built their laws on the belief that some beings are worth more than others, she said, her voice steady. It's time to show them how wrong they are. She turned to the ancient console, her fingers flying over the controls as she began downloading everything they'd discovered. Marcus worked beside her, his movements synchronized with hers as if they'd been partners for years rather than weeks. Above them, the Imperial ships drew closer, their sensors sweeping the surface of Sigma-9. But in the hidden facility, surrounded by the knowledge of an ancient civilization, a former queen and a human scientist prepared to change the course of galactic history. The revolution would begin here, in the most unlikely of places, with the most unlikely of allies. And it would begin with truth. The Imperial ships cast long shadows across Sigma-9's surface as they descended, their engines burning bright against the darkening sky. Inside the ancient facility, Zara and Marcus worked with desperate efficiency, transferring vast amounts of data while erasing their tracks. Data transfer at 80%, Marcus announced, his fingers dancing across the modified interface. But we've got another problem. These ships, they're not regular patrols. The energy signatures match Imperial Special Operations. Zara's hands froze over the controls. Special Operations meant Commander Rixus, the Empire's most ruthless enforcer. They know, she whispered. Somehow they know exactly what we've found. The facility's ancient systems hummed around them as Marcus pulled up a tactical display. 3 entry teams, moving in formation toward the outpost. They're trying to box us in. He turned to Zara, his expression grave. There's something you should know. That energy pulse that knocked my ship off course? It wasn't an accident. We detected unusual transmissions from Sigma-9, signs of advanced technology that shouldn't exist on a prison moon. I was sent to investigate. You used me? Zara's voice was sharp with hurt. No, Marcus replied firmly. My mission was to find the source of the transmissions. Meeting you, working with you, that was real. And it changed everything. He held her gaze. The human territories have been gathering evidence of the Empire's genetic manipulation programs for years. Your exile wasn't just about producing an heir. They feared your research would expose their methods. Before Zara could respond, the facility's sensors blared a new warning. The Imperial forces had found the hidden entrance. "We're out of time," she said, pushing aside her turbulent emotions. "Help me activate the facility's defense systems." They worked together, decoding the ancient commands that would seal the lower levels. But as the last firewall engaged, a familiar voice echoed through the facility's communication system. "Citizen Zara," Commander Rixus's metallic voice filled the chamber. "By order of the Imperial Crown, you are charged with treason. Your human conspirator is to be terminated. Surrender now, and the Empire may show mercy." Zara laughed bitterly. "Mercy? Like the mercy shown to the thousands of genetically inferior citizens you've quietly eliminated over the centuries?" She worked as she spoke, finalizing the data transfer while Marcus prepared their escape route. "The Empire maintains order," Rixus responded coldly. "Your research threatened that order. Did you think we wouldn't notice your unauthorized experiments? Your communication with human territories? My experiments?" Zara's heart pounded as understanding dawned. "You've been watching me since before my exile. The fertility issues, they were engineered, weren't they? A test of loyalty?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Marcus touched her arm gently. "The data transfer is complete. I've sent it through quantum channels to my contacts. Even if they catch us, the truth is already spreading." Above them, the sound of cutting tools against ancient metal signaled the Imperial forces' progress. They had minutes at most. Zara turned to the facility's central console, her decision made. "The Empire built its power on secrets," she said, entering a complex sequence of commands. "Let's see how they handle the light of truth." With a final keystroke, she activated the facility's primary systems. The entire structure hummed to life, dormant technology awakening after millennia of silence. Holographic displays filled the air, broadcasting their discoveries: the Empire's genetic manipulation program, the ancient race's advanced healing technologies, everything, across all Imperial communication channels. "What have you done?" Rixus's voice shook with rage. "Created change," Zara replied calmly. She turned to Marcus as the facility's walls began to shift, revealing a hidden passage. "The Empire thought they could bury their secrets here, on this forgotten moon. They never imagined they were building their prison on top of something far more powerful, hope." Marcus grinned, pulling out a small device. "Speaking of hope, remember that transmitter I've been working on? It's not just for sending data." He pressed a sequence of buttons, and new signals appeared on their tactical display. "Say hello to the Human Liberation Fleet. They've been waiting in the outer system, cloaked. Turns out I'm not the only one who believed this mission might change everything." The facility shook as Imperial forces began their final assault on the sealed doors. But Zara felt no fear. For the first time since her exile, she stood tall, every inch the queen she had once been, not because of her title, but because of her choices. "Shall we go greet our allies?" she asked Marcus, her silver skin glowing with reflected light from the ancient displays. He offered his hand. "After you, Your Majesty." Together, they raced through the hidden passage as the facility's automated defenses engaged behind them, buying them precious time. Above, the first shots of what would become known as the Liberation War lit up Sigma-9 sky, as human ships emerged from cloak to challenge Imperial dominance. The Empire had sought to bury their secrets in exile and silence. Instead, they had planted the seeds of their own transformation. And as Zara and Marcus emerged onto the surface of their prison moon, they knew that the Real Revolution was just beginning. The battle for Sigma-9's orbit painted the sky in flashes of light and color, human ships dancing between the larger Imperial vessels with surprising agility. On the surface, Zara and Marcus raced through the crystalline underground tunnels that connected the ancient facility to a hidden hangar bay, their footsteps echoing off walls that had waited millennia for this moment. "The fleet can't hold them off forever," Marcus said, checking the tactical display on his wrist unit. "But they don't need to. The data broadcast is spreading faster than the Empire can contain it. Reports of uprisings on 7 major worlds already." Zara's silver skin flickered with bioluminescent patterns, an involuntary response to intense emotion that she'd never quite managed to suppress. It's not just the data about their genetic manipulation program. It's the ancient race's solutions, their understanding of compatibility between species. Everything the Empire claimed was impossible. They emerged into a vast chamber that took their breath away. Dozens of sleek vessels stood in perfect preservation, their designs unlike anything either of them had seen. The ancient race hadn't just been scientists, they had been explorers, dreamers. They left these for someone to find, Zara realized, running her hand along the nearest ship's hull. They knew their civilization was ending, but they believed in a future where their knowledge could help others. A massive explosion rocked the chamber. Commander Rixus's forces had broken through the facility's outer defenses. Marcus rushed to the nearest ship, his hands flying over its controls. To their amazement, it powered up immediately, responding to their presence as if it had been waiting for them. "Quantum signatures detected," announced a melodic voice in a language they somehow understood. "Genetic profiles analyzed. Access granted to the inheritance protocol." The ship's interior lit up with living data, the accumulated knowledge of an ancient civilization interfacing seamlessly with their own technology. But before they could process this miracle, Imperial troops poured into the chamber, led by Commander Rixus himself. "Fascinating," the commander's augmented voice echoed through the hangar. "So this is what the ancients left behind. Their power will serve the Empire well." "You still don't understand," Zara said, stepping forward. Her royal bearing returned fully as she faced her former people. "The ancients didn't leave weapons or tools of control. They left understanding. Knowledge that proves every living being has value, that diversity makes us stronger." Rixus raised his weapon. Pretty words from a failed queen who couldn't perform her most basic duty. "Failed?" Marcus stepped beside her, unafraid. "She discovered what your empire has hidden for generations, that your genetic purity is a lie. Your manipulations haven't strengthened your people, they've weakened them. The ancients understood that evolution requires variety, change, growth." More ships around them hummed to life, responding to the truth in their words. The ancient race had built their technology to recognize not just genetic patterns, but the capacity for understanding and compassion. "Your empire is already changing," Zara continued, watching as some of the Imperial troops lowered their weapons, moved by the knowledge flooding their neural interfaces. "The question is whether you will change with it, or be left behind like the ruins of this facility." A new wave of explosions rocked the chamber, but these came from above. The ceiling burst open, revealing not Imperial reinforcements, but ships bearing the markings of a dozen different species, races that had lived under Imperial control for generations. "The broadcasts reached further than we expected," Marcus grinned. "Turns out we're not the only ones who believe in change." Commander Rixus fired, but his shot dissipated against a shield neither Zara nor Marcus had activated. The ancient technology was protecting them, recognizing them as the inheritors of its purpose. "The ancients called themselves the Guardians," Zara said, understanding flowing through her from her connection with the ship. "They didn't die out, they evolved beyond physical form. But they left these gifts, this knowledge, for species ready to take the next step in cooperation and growth." The chamber filled with representatives from a dozen worlds, their weapons trained on the Imperial forces. But Zara raised her hand, her voice carrying the authority not of a queen, but of someone who had found a greater truth. "There has been enough violence," she declared. The Empire's strength was built on the lie that some beings are worth more than others. Let its transformation begin with the truth that all life has value, that diversity brings strength, and that change is not something to fear but to embrace. One by one, the Imperial troops laid down their weapons. Commander Rixus, seeing his power crumble, made one last desperate attack, only to be restrained by his own soldiers. In the days that followed, the revelation of the Ancients' knowledge, combined with proof of the Empire's genetic manipulation program, sparked a peaceful revolution that transformed Centauri society. The human territories, along with other independent worlds, helped establish a new galactic council based on cooperation rather than control. Sigma 9, once a prison moon, became the site of the new council's center for scientific and cultural exchange. And at its heart, in the chambers of the ancient facility, Zara and Marcus continued their work, not as Exile and investigator, but as partners in discovering what was possible when different species came together in pursuit of knowledge and understanding. "You know," Marcus said one evening, as they watched the twin stars set from the facility's restored observation deck, "for a failed queen, you've done pretty well for yourself." Zara's silver skin glowed with contentment as she took his hand. "I didn't fail," she replied. "I just found a different way to create a future." Above them, ships from 100 worlds moved through the stars, their crews working together to build something new. The Empire had sought to maintain power through separation and control. But in the end, it was unity in diversity that had proven the stronger force. The ancient guardians had known this truth, and now, at last, their inheritors were ready to carry it forward into a future where no one would be exiled for being different, a future where change was not just accepted, but celebrated.